There are four basic shapes that we study in terms of form because everything in the world pretty much relates to these four basic shapes. Let's talk about how to draw these shapes first. The square may seem the most simple because it's made out of lines merely. This is a square drawn in perspective, so if we start here with the corner that's closest to us, we make a vertical line straight up and down on the page. As we grade your homework, we're going to look at whether that line is parallel to the edges of the page to judge whether it's straight up and down or not. These lines here go off almost in a 45-degree angle, so this one goes off to the right and this one goes off to the right. This one here goes off to the left and this one goes off to the left. And then about where we feel like that's a box, we should draw a straight line up and down here. These lines on top, our tendency is to draw these at a 45-degree angle too, but what happens is we get a box that's too open at the top, so I'd like you to make these go down just a little bit from that to make this look more like we actually see in perspective. So I've moved, if you notice, I drew up here first, and I want you to move that down so that we've got something more like we see in perspective. Imagining this corner dropping straight down like the rest of them do, this would be the inside of the box, and then this would go off to the right, and this would go off to the left until it hits that corner. So this is then where we're imagining the bottom of this hitting the table. If a light was coming from this direction and casting down at a 45-degree angle is usually the way that I like to perceive it, either from the right or the left. But the shadow of this would be cast out this direction from this corner and from this corner. And I also draw a line out from this corner. Because then when the light comes down this way, if I take a 45 this direction from this corner right here, and I want to erase this because it's confusing me a little bit. So let's go from this corner down at a 45 until it hits this line, right? So this goes down to the table here. This is a line that represents that corner. So I'm just going to come down there till that hits right there. I'm going to come down this way till this hits the table right about there. I'm going to come down from here till that hits the table right about there. That gives me 3 points. I can dot to dot to connect this way. And these lines should pretty much replicate this line. So this line here is casting shadow on the table right there. This line is casting a shadow on the table right there. This line that we see here is this line here. And this line over here is on its way to this corner, but we'll stop it right there at the box. So we now have a box and a shadow. The circle you may want to relate to a box. If you want the circle to be a certain size, then you draw a box like so, same height, same width. If I want to see if it's equal, then I take my pencil and I measure. I'm measuring from this point of the blue right there. Pinch my pencil and go this way and see if they're the same. That's close enough. I want the circle to touch here and here and here and here, right? That would be the center. And then the key to this is actually staying loose and drawing around and around until I get a circle that feels like it's hitting those spots. I can never draw a circle really accurately just by going dot, 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 dot. I have to do around 2 or 3 times before I get it. Then I'm going to go ahead and draw more solidly, and I'm going to sort of compromise all those lines to make something I like. I turn my paper here for sure because I'm best at drawing a circle as it arches up. I cannot really draw down like this very well. So turn your paper 4 ways. If this happens like it did to me, see how that's sort of smashed up on one side? That's okay, just redraw it. Give yourself maybe a goal out here so that you're sort of rounding that out towards where you want it to be. And make your circle a little nicer. Sometimes you'll want to take, if it's pointy here at the ends, you want to take these and sort of round them out a little bit more, so you don't get anything too pointed there. The shadow of the circle is going to be an ellipse. So if the light's coming this direction, it's going to cast an ellipse on the table and it's going to come out past this center line here. It's going to come out here. One thing about shadow, if you look at this square, Notice how the shadow connects on the table here with where it's shaded on the side. So this side of the box is going to be in shadow, and this is going to be shadow. And actually where this box comes down the table is right there where the shadow starts. With the circle, that's not quite the case because the shadow is going to come down this way, and so it's going to connect out in front a little bit. And this point is actually going to be out here, let's say, if we come at a 45. So maybe my shadow needs to be that long. I should draw an ellipse into that. I do that 2 or 3 times because I need to make sure it's getting round. And then I come and I draw, not even really picking a line, I'm just sort of seeing that ellipse and drawing into it. The cylinder is an ellipse on top. So if we have a circle in perspective, it becomes an ellipse. So if I turn this away from the camera, notice how the top of this circle becomes elliptical, right? It's still the same length from here to here, but it's getting shorter from here to here as I turn it away from the camera. So a circle in perspective becomes an ellipse. Now I'm going to want to draw a line through the center of that ellipse to align my bottom ellipse on. I'm going to come tangent to the ellipse right here, so I may want to get horizontal and vertical guidelines on that ellipse. It's a really good idea because my ellipses tend to tilt to the right and the left. Ellipses are kind of tricky. They tend to get pointed on the ends and they tend to slant. I decide how long I want it to be and I get a horizontal drawn through the bottom. And now I've got another ellipse that should land right there. So loosely and lightly, I go around and around till I feel pretty good about it. Then here where it's tangent, I come and I draw a curve up into it. Do that on the other side. I like this line here, so I'm going to come down this way. Come this direction at it. The ellipse at the bottom of the cylinder should be as round or rounder than this ellipse up here at the top. It's further away from our eye, so it actually would be a little bit more round than the ellipse at the eye level. We also want to make sure that these come tangent to the center. It's very often the case that we draw an ellipse like this, and then we get a very flat kind of ellipse at the bottom and a very pointy kind of thing happening down here. That's because this ellipse is centered up here, and this should have been drawn from there coming down to make it much more round. So if it's not round enough, or you feel like there's a point right here at the bottom of your cup or your cylinder or whatever it is you're drawing, you kind of want to round that out because that's going to give it the look of the perspective that we're looking for. The shadow coming from this direction would be tangent to the ellipse right here, come straight out, and tangent to the ellipse right here and come straight out. So these two lines I'm going to draw horizontally, and then this entire ellipse would be cast down onto the table. So here I'm going to draw another ellipse. Might be good to pull this out, make sure that I'm tangent there and there, that I'm touching here and here and here and here. Then I'm going to draw the end of that in here and here. The cone is similar to that. It has an ellipse at the bottom. The center line comes up to a point. And then that point gets connected to this tangent here and this tangent out here. But if I draw a cone without a center line, it tends to get a little bit wobbly or wonky, or it tends to lean off to one side or the other. So it's important to have that line down the middle. We're also going to use that line later to shade it, so it's not a problem to have this point is going to come down here. It's not a problem to have that line through the middle. This point is going to come down here to cast a point on the table, and then we're going to connect that to this tangent here on the ellipse, and this tangent back over here. So the shadow of the cone would look something like this. The place where it turns from light to shadow is actually right here. So how we said the point of this cube is where the shadow starts on the table. The place where the shadow touches this is where we would see the line between light and shadow on this cylinder, and on this cone, same thing. For this exercise, you're going to draw them right up through the middle and figure these are tangents straight across. The sphere is going to have a C shape in here. If you imagine a circle in there like I just drew lightly, there's going to be a C shape here where it turns from light over here to darkness over there. So if you look at the pictures of the cone or the Earth from space or something like that, then you'll see sort of a C shape like that, and that's why we see the moon in this kind of crescent shape too as it moves around the Earth.